Oh hey, didn't see you there. The cannibal fandom is going crazy, and I have 3 ideas why that could be. Number 1 is Arby's really does have the meat. Number 2 is people heard you are what you eat and really want to be human. And number 3 is Tokyo Ghoul is just really cool. Tokyo Ghoul, written by Shuichi Ishida, was a phenomenon, starting with its first chapter in Weekly Young Jump in 2011, and it went strong through different series all the way up till 2018, going from Tokyo Ghoul to Tokyo Ghoul Re in around 2014. And the reception was fitting for a series that ran that long. It was nominated for awards, the sales were stellar through its entire run, and it was banned in China. Huh. One of those wasn't like the other. But you know, when something is popular, you get spin-offs. There are Tokyo Ghoul novels called Tokyo Ghoul Days, Void, and Past. There is the first one, Days, that seems to mostly tell of the daily lives of ghouls and humans. It of course has a plot, if that's something you look for in a plot-driven media. But moving on, we have Tokyo Ghoul Void, which fills the void of a 6-month time skip that happens partway into the series. Last, we have Tokyo Ghoul Past, and would you believe me if I told you it took place in the past before the series started? I would say you're full of crap, personally. There's also the manga Tokyo Ghoul Jack, which got an OVA with the same title, that is another prequel to the series that follows a high school student by day, ghoul investigator by night. Also in the animated front, there is Tokyo Ghoul Pinto, which is an adaptation of one of the stories in Days. But wait a second, we aren't done yet. We have video games. There is Tokyo Ghoul Carnival Cover, which was a mobile game, Tokyo Ghoul Jail, which follows a new protagonist in a kind of sort of RPG game released only in Japan and on the PS Vita. Tokyo Ghoul Jail, no, I'll never make it, I don't have nearly enough zippers! Back on mobile, there's Tokyo Ghoul Dark War and Re-Invoke, which all of these mobile games seem to have shut down, but in 2019, Tokyo Ghoul finally got its console debut in Tokyo Ghoul Re, Called to Exist, which existing is all this game managed to do. Kinda just came out, and word of mouth of it not being that good was enough to really stop, well, looking at it really. There were also the live action movies. We can move on anytime, just let me know when you're ready. It seemed like outside of printed media in the anime sphere, Tokyo Ghoul didn't exactly have the easiest time, but we can't let that understate just how influential and how much of an impact the show had. A shallow but very notable thing to point out is the fact that the Tokyo Ghoul opening on YouTube has 158 million views on one upload, as well as 57 million on another, making this probably one of the most viewed anime openings on all of YouTube. The weirdest way to describe the impact of the song is Unravel was this generation's version of Cruel Angel Thesis. I'm not gonna elaborate. But after all that walking around, what's Tokyo Ghoul about? Ghouls in Tokyo is a solid first guess, cause you would be right. The series follows Ken Kaneki in a world where there are creatures known as ghouls that have superhuman abilities like regeneration, a weapon on their back called Kagane, and primarily survive off of consuming human flesh, completely unable to eat anything else without being sick, but coffee seems to be fun. Good, cause even as a ghoul, I can't start my day without a cup of joe. Oh, that's the stuff. There's like a somewhat war between ghouls and humans who've kind of developed their own ways of fighting ghouls. Where Kaneki is the only one who can really understand both sides because he was born a human but was later turned into a ghoul in events of the first chapter. The story explores a very interesting dynamic of the misunderstandings of both humans and ghouls, where while it makes sense for humanity to want to get rid of ghouls or to make sure they don't kill people, it also makes sense for ghouls to want to be a member of the whole living community, and they're willing to make sure they do what it takes, even going as far to eat humans. But not at Denny's. They have standards. It's a tragic tale for the majority of people involved, but especially Kaneki as he struggles to walk the line between human and ghoul, and bear the weight of every single responsibility he's picked up on his way. However, with that we can get into some of the characters. We have the before mentioned Kaneki, who starts off as weak and reserved because, you know, he was a literal college student before all of this, but became a much stronger character in both resolve and fighting ability with a little bit of help from intense trauma. Just a little bit of trauma goes a long way. It's a shame he got a lot of it. There's Toka, who's the first ghoul he really encounters. Her role evolves throughout the course of the story, but she kind of serves as a guide for Kaneki starting out. She introduces him to Enteku, the coffee shop of ghouls who don't want to do that whole murder everyone thing, and she helps him get used to life as a ghoul. There's Rize, who, also helps him become a ghoul. I use specific wording there for a reason. While her specific runtime in the show is pretty short-lived, she stays relevant in the plot, and to Kaneki personally as he wants answers about her. Again, more on that later. There is Hide, who is Kaneki's best friend while he was a human, and when Kaneki disappears into his life as a ghoul, Hide searches for him, creating this multiple path plot. Much like the fight between humans and ghouls that have their own perspectives, there's multiple plots of Kaneki doing his thing, Hide looking for Kaneki, that end up converging within the second season. But Tokyo Ghoul is a series with a whole lot of moving pieces. There's every member of the CCG that have their own goals, plot motivations. There are different factions of ghouls with different ranks. The series tries to tell a tale of multiple perspectives. While neither side is wrong, there are wrong people on each side, and it does a great job at expressing that. You find yourself having sympathy for the ghouls, for the humans, for Kaneki. Dear God, you have sympathy for Kaneki. But it's hard to be angry at either side. It's just unfortunate, and the characters know that as they grow and the story progresses. Like how my view of the Sesame Street character Big Bird changed from resentment. It turned into fear. But let's get into that first chapter and see what really popped the series off. It's on the surface really straightforward with its premise, but reveals a lot more than it lets on. Starting off with someone receiving the business end of a good old dying, but then it cuts to a much calmer scene of our lead character Kaneki at a coffee shop with his friend Hide. We get introduced to Kaneki, and he's a nerd, and the conversation turns into the existence of ghouls. In Tokyo? No, that's where the Revengers are. Kaneki considers them more monsters, while Hide actually, in a seemingly joking manner, sees them more like, as you know, people. But the conversation kind of turns into more talking about Kaneki's dating life, where Hide's a silly little guy. I sure hope nothing bad happens to him. But we get introduced to character Toka, who will be more relevant throughout the story. But the person Kaneki was talking about walks through the door, and with a connection to similar books they both like to read, Kaneki manages to get a date. I'm working on a theory, and I'm wondering if it'll hold up by the end of this chapter. So to really condense it, Kaneki goes on a date, but it turns out Rize is a ghoul who had nothing but full intentions of killing and eating Kaneki. Before she can kill him, a steel beam falls on her, and her organs get transported into our lead character, making him go through the transformation into a ghoul. It's once you're already kind of familiar with the story that you see how many hints that just keep adding up. Rize not eating during a date, Toka's reaction to seeing someone around Rize, the context of a book they're reading. It's all hints that are hidden just below the obvious surface. But if there's one thing I can bring up about Tokyo Ghoul, it's the fact that I can summarize it in just one word. Suffering. The anime is also a really solid watch, if I'm being honest. If you don't do that whole paper thing, I hear trees protest it. While Route A, which is the second season of Tokyo Ghoul, isn't bad, there are some questionable events, but when you read how much they changed from the manga, I'm going to do something that I normally avoid when I do overviews of series, and I'm going to talk about specifics in the story. Now, I want to mention, when I first watched Route A, I did like it. I mean, I already had some issues with it, but when I like a property enough, I do that quirky reading thing. And it was when I read the manga that I just saw, why did they make the choices that they did? Oh man, I accidentally grabbed a script for season 2 with my syrup hand, now I can't read it. Oh well, let me just fill in some of the details. So a quick recap of one of the changes Route A did was they had Kaneki join a group of people that caused him to have an aggressive math study session, and oh, the adventures they had. Well, I didn't necessarily understand why Kaneki chose to do that. Personally, I hated math class, but I was okay to see where things led. While in the manga, Kaneki created a group that hunted down these people. You hear that, Teachers Association of America? You're There are just two differences. While they both kind of end up at the same place, one needed more explanation, and the other didn't need any. But that's not all. There are different plot points in the manga that Route A just didn't touch that are important to read. So that accidentally creates a situation where if you want the whole Tokyo Ghoul story with as much of the anime as possible, you would have to stop at episode 12, read the manga part that Route A skipped, and go back into the anime where Re starts. But if you have to read the manga anyway, why would you go back to the anime? I understand if you start then pivot, but what were they thinking? Tokyo Ghoul is a great series and still remembered very fondly by the anime community. But it's also remembered as something that could have gotten better. But you know what did get better? The Tokyo Ghoul Cooties theory. So if you actually look at volume 4,